Quick correction before the script, multiple outlets ESPN, the Fever Zone recap, Washington Post, report the final score as 105-95, not 103-95, and describe Boston's injury as a lower leg injury rather than a knee injury specifically. I've used the corrected details below. There are nights in sports when a scoreline tells you everything, and there are nights when the scoreline is just the surface, a thin layer sitting on top of something much more dramatic underneath. Tuesday night in Seattle was the second kind of night. Climate Pledge Arena had not been kind to its home team all season. The Storm carried a brutal 4-10 record on their own floor into this game, a building that was supposed to be a fortress and had instead become a source of dread. And on top of that shaky foundation, they were about to face the team that had already beaten them twice this year. The Indiana Fever were in town for the third and final chapter of their season series, and if Seattle wanted any pride heading into the second half of the year, this was the night to find it. For a while, it looked like the same story on repeat. Indiana came out like a team that had already seen this movie and knew exactly how it ended. They surged to a 17-point lead by the end of the first quarter, playing with the kind of rhythm that makes a game feel over before it's even reached the halfway point. Caitlin Clark was locked in Aliyah, finding her spacing, picking her spots, and Kelsey Mitchell was right there beside her, efficient, sharp, dangerous from every level of the floor. It had the feel of a laugher, a statement game, the kind of night where the home crowd goes quiet by the second quarter and stays that way. But basketball has a way of punishing comfort, and midway through the second quarter, the entire tone of the night shifted in an instant. Aliyah Boston, the Fever's anchor in the paint, set a screen and rolled toward the rim, the exact kind of red she's made 1,000 times in her career. But this time, she got tangled up with Seattle's Flaujae Johnson, and she went down hard. Not a stumble, not a roll of the ankle you shake off. She hit the floor and immediately grabbed at her leg, and you could feel the entire arena hold its breath for a second. Officials called the foul. Boston stayed down. She was eventually helped off the court, initially considered questionable, but that questionable status wouldn't last. She was done for the night. For Indiana, this was the moment the game could have unraveled. Lose your starting center, lose your interior presence, and suddenly a 17-point cushion doesn't feel nearly as safe as it did 5 minutes earlier. And Seattle knew it. Sensing blood, sensing an opening, the Storm came out of halftime with an entirely different level of urgency. This is where the suspense really begins. Because Seattle didn't just chip away, they surged. Natisha Hiedeman, who would go on to torch Indiana for a career night, started finding her rhythm from all over the floor. The margin that had felt untouchable in the first quarter started shrinking possession by possession. 10 points, then 8, then 6. By the time the third quarter wound down, Seattle had clawed all the way back to within 4. 4 points. A game that had looked like a rout by intermission had turned into a genuine nail-biter, and Climate Pledge Arena, dead silent an hour earlier, was suddenly roaring. This was the exact scenario Indiana couldn't afford. No Boston in the middle. A rival mounting a real comeback. A road environment turning hostile in real time. Every possession in that fourth quarter carried weight, the kind of weight that decides not just a game, but a season series, a trip storyline, and momentum heading into the next stretch of games. And this is where Caitlin Clark took over. With her team's interior anchor gone and the lead nearly evaporated, Clark refused to let the game slip away. She kept attacking. She kept finding ways to generate offense when Indiana desperately needed someone to steady the ship. Every time Seattle threatened to complete the improbable comeback, Clark had an answer. A deep three, a drive to the rim, a play that reset the margin just enough to keep the Storm at arm's length. Kelsey Mitchell matched her step for step, shooting the ball with efficiency all night, finishing 9 for 18 from the field for 28 points of her own. Together, they became the wall Seattle simply couldn't break through. Slowly, painfully for the Storm, that fourth quarter rally ran out of oxygen. The deficit that had shrunk to 4 points began creeping back up. 6, 9, 12. What had been building into one of the most dramatic comeback attempts of the Storm season instead collapsed under the weight of Indiana's poise. By the final buzzer, the Fever had done enough to escape with a hard-fought 105-95 victory, finishing off a season sweep of Seattle and improving to 18-10 on the year. Clark finished with a team-high 32 points, but the number alone doesn't capture what she did with it. How she carried the offense through a wave of adversity, how she raised her level exactly when her team's foundation cracked. On the other side, Natisha Hiedeman put together a monster individual performance with 33 points, more than enough to lead all scorers, but not enough to overcome Indiana down the stretch. And yet, as the final horn sounded and Indiana celebrated a hard-earned sweep, the real headline of the night wasn't the scoreboard. It was Aliyah Boston, sitting in the locker room with ice on her leg, waiting for results that would determine far more than just her availability for Friday's game against Portland. In a league where every single game matters, where playoff positioning can shift on a single injury, the Fever won the battle Tuesday night. But they walked away from Seattle not entirely sure what they'd lost in the process. That's the story of this game. Not just a comeback that almost happened. Not just a career night from an opposing player. But a team that got hit with adversity in real time and had to find out, possession by possession, quarter by quarter, whether their two stars could carry them through it. On Tuesday, they did. The question now is what happens next, as the Fever head to Portland already wondering how much they'll have left in the tank without one of their most important pieces on the floor.